Respiratory Physiology. Course title is PIO 214. That's a course title. The course code is PIO 214. And the course title is Respiratory Physiology. In fact, PIO 214 is composed of two systems, which are cardiovascular physiology and respiratory physiology. I will be taking you the respiratory part, like I stated in our previous class. Who is taking you on cardiovascular physiology? Who is teaching cardiovascular? Nobody. You've not started? Okay. The lecturer for cardiovascular physiology will come to class. But for me, I have started my part. So, as we discussed previously, the course outline. In our last class, we looked at the meaning of respiratory physiology. We also looked at the meaning or definition of respiration and the steps of respiration. And I am sure that we also did the physiologic anatomy of the respiratory system. All right? Okay. At that class, I took my time to define what respiration is all about and the 5 steps of respiration. We went ahead to discuss what external and internal respiration was all about. At that class, I also talked about the physical process of gas transport, because respiratory physiology is all about the exchange of gases from the external environment to the respiratory tract and the blood and the tissues. This physical process of respiration simply shows you, because I think I wanted to show you the diagram and explain this diagram, but it didn't work out. But fortunately, the diagram is clear on the slide. What this is telling you, or what is describing, is how oxygen is exchanged or enters the lungs from the external environment. And then from the lungs, the oxygen enters the blood, and from the blood, it goes into the tissues. Conversely, carbon dioxide leaves the tissues to the blood, and then to the lungs, and then to the external environment. So what this diagram is showing you is how oxygen enters the respiratory tract and how carbon dioxide leaves the tissues to the external environment. So, the funnel-like structure we are seeing here represents the respiratory tract. Okay? It will take this to be the trachea. Then we can take the base of the funnel-like structure to be the lungs. This structure you are seeing here, the rectangular or square-like structure, represents the blood, while the circular-like structure here represents the tissues. So what is happening here is that, let's take oxygen first, then we'll take carbon dioxide. Oxygen we are taking oxygen. So oxygen from the external environment enters into the trachea and then to what? The lungs. From the lungs, the oxygen diffuses. You can see the direction of the arrow. The oxygen diffuses into where? The blood. From the blood, this oxygen, in fact, is transported by the blood, and it diffuses from the blood into where? The tissues. And this is where cellular respiration takes place. The exchange of gases between the tissue and the blood. It's that simple. Conversely, carbon dioxide, which is already in the tissue, would diffuse out of the tissue to where? To the blood. And from the blood, the carbon dioxide is transported to where? To the lungs. Good. From the lungs, what happens? This carbon dioxide is exhaled into where? The external environment. So, all of these describes the physical process of respiration, that is gas transport. We are going to look at that later on in this class. And then we looked at the anatomy of the respiratory tract or system. And at that class, we discussed the bronchopulmonary segment, or tree. There, we classified the respiratory system into two tracts, which are the upper respiratory tract and the lower what? Respiratory tracts. And we looked at all of the structures making those tracts. And then we also looked at the respiratory zone and what? The conducting zone. The structures making up the conducting zone and the structures that makes the respiratory zone. And we said at that class that the conducting zone is not involved in gaseous exchange, that its main function, physiologically speaking, is to transport air or oxygen from the external environment into the respiratory tract. And it cleans this air, humidifies the air, makes the air warm. But most importantly, this portion of the respiratory tract is involved in making the air that we breathe free from germs and bacteria. Whereas the respiratory zone is the zone that is in charge in everything that has to do with gaseous exchange. Yes. Okay. We also looked at the functions of the respiratory system. And we said that the respiratory system has two main functions.